Hey guys, I just want to let you know before we get into this episode that we've partnered with Band Builder Academy. Band Builder Academy is the #1 place to grow your music career. Run by top label manager and Sony Vice President Todd McCarthy, so you know it's worth it. Enter promo code CONCERTS at checkout to receive 10% off membership.
Hi, this is Michael from Bird Problems.
Hey, I'm Daniel from Bird Problems, and
you're listening to the Concerts That Made Us.
Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, Concerts That Made Us. Interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down. The greatest live shows and that cheering crowd sound. It's concerts, concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
On this episode, I'm joined by Daniel and Michael from Bird Problems. This is another listener requested episode, so shout out to Dan from Venicava. I chat with Daniel and Michael about everything that is Bird Problems, including past, present, future, and some pretty cool concert experiences. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show. Daniel and Michael, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thanks for having us. How are you?
Yeah, thanks.
I'm good. How are you guys? You doing well?
Doing well, thanks.
Doing great.
Brilliant. So we opened the show with your track Pigeon Superstition. Would you like to tell us a bit about it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so this one, definitely an upbeat, kind of chaotic tune, especially with that main riff, which I believe was the first thing that came about for that song. And yeah, it's a really, I view it as sort of a really non-stop song. You know, we there's not really a lot of breaks in there. We're really going hard. I sweat a lot playing that one, and you know, it's always fun to have songs like that that are just high energy the whole time. One part leading into the next, not necessarily much coming back in. You know, keeping it progressive and heavy. You know, that main riff is nice and heavy and catchy. So I really like that one.
Yeah, I think I like how it's dynamic. Like you're saying, keeps people guessing. Not everyone knows exactly where it's going to go. It's a little show offy, I think, also in some ways, which I think people like. And it definitely was the one that seemed to resonate the most with people off of that EP.
Something I noticed now when I listened to it was at the start, like you said, you don't know where it's going to go. It starts off and you're kind of expecting one thing, and then all of a sudden it just breaks into something completely different, you know?
Totally. I think that's something we try to do a lot of, like I guess surprising and contrasting things. You know, there's kind of the nice chords that come in, and then even when the main drum and bass join those chords, even already you're kind of subverted because it's not really necessarily the beat you were expecting or the feel you were expecting, and then we flip it on its head again. I think we like doing that a lot.
Yeah, keep them guessing, huh? And it's off the EP Beyond the Nest. What was the process like for making that?
Oh, Beyond the Nest was interesting. So we probably recorded that over the course of several years, kind of just demoing things. I'll talk a little bit about our process. Daniel can fill in the blanks. But basically, we didn't want to do a full album. We wanted to just get stuff out. We figured another album would take a really long time, and we wanted to just kind of keep spreading things out. We pretty much just demoed everything. We were actually back and forth between several cities. The band at that point was split between two cities, so there was a lot of travel involved. Our guitarist Joseph, who does the engineering and production, actually came to see me. I do the vocals, and we recorded the bulk of the vocals, at least, in around 10 days on university campus where I was near where I was living at the time. Joseph slept on like my couch in my studio apartment. It was really overall very DIY, and definitely a grind.
Yeah, and that's kind of the process we have kept for the existence of the band. I mean, we do things very, very much ourselves, and luckily Joseph has been working on his engineering, recording, things like that, mixing. So having a guy like that in your band allows you to just kind of do most of the stuff yourself. And really, our only thing that we needed to outsource for Beyond the Nest was drums. So we went up and took a road trip to the US and worked with a lovely man named Evan Salmons out in Maine. We stayed out there for a couple of days and got the drums done just because it was just the perfect room and the perfect connection. So, but yeah, the writing and demoing happens over many months, even a couple of years. We're very picky with our songs, and we don't just kind of write and that's it. We really go over things a lot, and we write too many songs and we scrap a lot of them. Like we're very hard on ourselves.
You mentioned there the band was split between two cities. What's it like trying to keep a band together when you're not all in the same location?
So it wasn't actually so bad. So we started off in Montreal, in Quebec, and then we ended up with half the band in Toronto, which is about a 6-hour drive. And, you know, we found that we had already started doing shows in Toronto, and we were making a lot of trips out there anyways. And there was definitely like a nice dedicated prog scene over there as well. So we found ourselves playing some really good shows in Toronto anyways. So for me, at least, I was living in Toronto. It really cut down on travel for me because I didn't have to drive the whole band 6 hours anymore on those road trips. And And it just meant that instead of all of us traveling once in a while to do a gig, sort of half of us are traveling. And like I was saying before, we do our tracking all separate anyways. Since our first album, we also haven't really written necessarily by jamming because the stuff is a lot more deliberate and calculated. We will write almost by sending stuff back and forth, I'll write stuff on my own, practice melodies, send them back, we'll iterate. And then we only really need to get together for small bursts to kind of track each of our parts.
And was there ever any plans to release physical copies of the EP?
Sort of. I think that's a lot of that stuff depends on the demand, and it's tough. Like we did for our first album have CDs, and then CDs kind of went out of fashion, and now it's vinyl pressing. And then the issue over the pandemic with vinyls was crazy. Like the production slowed so much, and so it's tough to go through that and then like spend a ton of money, and then you just have a bunch of vinyls lying around. Like I think we're just finishing selling our CDs from like 2017 now. So it's a long process to just kind of keep stuff around and stock, but we have had a lot of requests for it. So maybe the next release we'll think about it. And there's always the option to do something with Beyond the Nest physically. I don't know how many people still do CDs, and everything. Like a lot of what I hear is that people want it on vinyl, which is just a whole other can of worms that we haven't explored yet, but we should moving forward.
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, if anyone's listening and wants a vinyl, let us know, hit us up for sure. Because that's the only way we'll know that there's demand. But I think I'd love to do a vinyl run of something, and we'd probably just need to do like pre-orders and get a sense of who wants it first. And if enough people actually want it, then we can go ahead and do the run.
I always find it funny with physical copies nowadays. It feels like second nature when someone says they're putting something out on vinyl. But when a band says nowadays they're putting something out on CD, I instantly in my head go, CD, really? That's still a thing?
No, exactly. It's weird. And I collected a couple CDs like of when I was listening to prog and metalcore and stuff, and yeah, they're just kind of sitting there now. What am I going to do with them,
Yeah. And I know you guys are working on some new music at the moment. What's the process for you guys like when it's time to make new music?
Yeah, so we usually start sort of. It starts with Joseph, our guitarist, and I'm the drummer, and so it's a lot of demoing on Logic in a room. I'm not even behind the kit. Drum programming, messing around with riffs, sort of ideas. I might come with a drum part programmed, a pattern for a breakdown program. Joseph might have a riff idea in mind, and we're kind of bouncing stuff off of each other, and then. That slowly develops into sort of a skeleton, a couple of riffs and transitions together. And then we'll get everyone in the room and start to sort of think about where it's going to go, what can happen here. Michael will start writing his parts, his vocals. Bass will have maybe be outlined sort of in advance, but then Matt will come in and add his flair to it. And again, we're all coming into the room at a certain point and just kind of, okay, what's this song going to be? Where can this go? And giving each other ideas about each other's parts too, not only like stuck in our own stuff, but it's very just like get in a room for a few hours and grind out ideas and over weeks or months or whatever. Sometimes like a Jerk Chicken on the album, I think it was 2 different sessions. It was like 2 days. It just wrote itself. It was one of those songs like that can happen, but I know that one of the songs on our new thing that we're going to put out is like it literally took over a year to finish. Like it's just because you park it and then you do other stuff, you come back. So it really depends, but there's a good mix of like the collaborative and then the individual work. So it's interesting in that way.
I'll build on that a bit. Like I always, because we sort of have pauses between writing sessions, I usually have about like a 40-page document of lyrics and concepts before there's anything. And then I'll sort of write these skeletons of songs. But like Daniel was saying, we're hard on ourselves. And sometimes I'll record something and the words, since I've written them before, they don't really fit with the melody or they don't really fit the area. So I'll often have to just rewrite something kind of on the fly as we're recording. And that's where I'll go back to my document and say, okay, like I need a few words on this theme that might rhyme with this. And so I'll quickly take and adapt things. And a lot of stuff that's on there ends up sort of being written kind of on the fly, which is pretty fun. I'd like to think it still kind of fits and works conceptually. So
Yeah, and I have to mention your sound. I know we spoke briefly about it earlier, but your sound, the first thing that struck me was it's like if jazz music and metal music had a baby. It's kind of, do you ever go to a jazz gig and it's like all the individual musicians just take off and do their own thing, and it sounds like it shouldn't work, but it works perfectly? That's what your sound is kind of like. How did you, come up with that sound? Was it a conscious decision to sound like that?
I mean, I was just gonna say our band is literally 50% jazz musicians and 50% metal kids. Like Daniel and I, like grew up listening to metalcore, and when we first started jamming, we were playing stuff that I'm sure we'll touch on when we talk about those concerts and our influences. But we were just going to all these metalcore shows, Escape the Fate, Energy Carry, A Day to Remember, doing like this sort of pop punk, hardcore influenced stuff and writing things like that. And then Joseph and Matt both have gone to jazz school and are jazz guys who like metal. So I think it kind of evolves naturally from just that 50-50. You want to add anything, Daniel?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's interesting. We all like similar stuff. Like there's overlap for bands that we all listen to that have that exact same sort of like, oh, this is something in between genres, and then we'll all listen to our own stuff, and Michael and I grew up maybe on the heavier end of things, but then getting influenced by these guys as we started jamming together, like with jazz, with instrumental stuff, with prog music, and then all of that meshing together. It's really, it's a product of our influence too, for sure. Like what we listen to, what we like, and not necessarily trying to emulate one thing, but just like a bunch of things, and it ends up being this weird prog baby that we make.
Makes sense. Now, for any of the European listeners, that might not have heard you guys, I'd love to give them a bit of a history of the band. So you've been together for 10 years, but what's the story behind the band? How did Bird Problems come to be?
Yeah, so like Michael was mentioning, like we're brothers. I don't know if that was clear or not, but Michael and I are brothers. So we grew up, I like 2 years apart. He's the older brother. He's showing me all these cool bands, and I'm like, I want to listen to everything that he's showing me. So it starts with that, just growing up together and listening to music. And then he played guitar a bit. I started with piano really young, and then I didn't really like it. And then at a certain point, I really wanted to play the drums. So it started just us two jamming together. And Michael was very, very creative, like writes not only like musically, but like he wrote stories even before they wrote. He always wrote. So very easy when you're like jamming with someone who can just create stuff. He's like, I wrote this riff, I wrote this song. Like, so it was just super easy to just like write drum parts to that. And then so you start practicing songwriting really early, which is huge. And then we went to high school with Joseph, and sort of started, you go to the music room at high school and you meet people. So started playing with him, and he was kind of more into like the dad rock stuff, but I think we showed him a little more of the metalcore and a little more metal stuff, and he like blew his mind. He was super into it. So then he started practicing and learning more of that stuff. And then we met our original bassist in college, and we were with him for a couple of years, and then we just switched for Matt a couple of years ago as well, who we always kind of knew as well and was around in the scene and went to jazz school with Joseph. So there was that connection. But we just met each other and kind of asked you want to jam, you want to write some stuff, and yeah, that was it.
Michael, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so our first, we're actually coming up on the 9-year anniversary of our first gig. So we were definitely playing stuff together before then. Our first few gigs were really in these like kind of sketchy underground spots. And it was just like very much a product of the time. And we were really like just on the grind, like paying our dues, probably had to put down a deposit for our first few shows to like, and make it back by selling the tickets, like really some shady situations. But we would do that one underground show, and then someone would say, hey, I know a promoter at this bar, and then we'd play there, and someone might give us a lead for something else. And so we just really, really gigged around the scene for a long, long time. And now now we're finding that, especially when we're writing, we're trying to slow down, not play as many shows because we only have so much time. So we're focused more on the writing. But that's pretty much been the evolution. We put out our first album in 2017, which was this like big concept album. I wrote a novella to accompany it. So I have like a chapter for each song that kind of feeds into the concept. It was this big thing. And since then, we put out Beyond the Nest, which was a little bit more contained. And we're looking forward to doing more cool stuff.
I see. And before we move on, I have to ask, you guys is probably asked all the time, you probably hate hearing it. What's with the obsession with birds?
Well, as it's interesting. We hear a lot of interpretations of the band name, and I love them all. But I mean, it's really easy to write songs about birds and bird imagery and use it for merch. It's a really easy. Like, we kind of stumbled into it, though. That wasn't the intention. It wasn't like, let's make our band about birds. It was just, let's make a band. We're 16 and we need a name, and we just we came up with bird problems. But it ended up doing us well, because every merch design, every logo, song names, titles, Beyond the Nest was all bird inspired. There was all the songs were bird themes, and it's easy to lean into. We always talk amongst ourselves if we want to lean further into it or not, and I guess it depends. But easy imagery, easy writing. It's all right there.
It's a good idea, actually, when you put it like that.
That's pretty much it. What was I going to say? Well, we like telling the story that we played a show a few years into being a band, and one of the bands we were playing with was like, so like, when are you guys going to get a real name? That just made us like, well, now we can't change it, right? So that kind of emboldened us. I've done a lot of stuff kind of attached to the band based on the theme. So I work in game design and stuff like that. So I would make these games sort of also based on birds, like using some of the music, and I would give these like talks and presentations and show all these bird things. And just eventually people would just see me and be like, oh yeah, I saw you give that talk. You're the bird guy. And so I again sort of became the bird guy through this unwittingly. And when you look back, there's like just written all these papers on birds and then like all this bird psychology stuff. So I think that comes through in Beyond the Nest, but it wasn't necessarily on purpose. Again, it's such a common image. And like Daniel was saying, people interpret it all sorts of different ways, which is really what you want. And if you just Google list of birds, choose one, write a song. That's good constrained writing. Otherwise, there's too much possibility space.
Yeah, true. Do you guys have individual nicknames for birds for yourselves or anything? Has it gone that far yet?
We were just talking about this, actually. I know that like your writing pseudonym is M.A. Goose.
Yes. So I mentioned I wrote that novella for our first album, Tar, and I wrote it under the pen name of Merlin and Hinga Goose, which all three of them are birds. But we don't really, like, people always ask who's who on the album cover, because there's 4 of us and there's 4 birds, but those birds are the songs. Like they're all of us. I think they're all facets of us.
Yeah, agreed.
I see. And you guys asked for my best bird pun. This is really bad. I can't believe I'm actually going to say this, but it's kind of music linked. What do you call birds who don't know song lyrics?
I don't know.
Hummingbirds.
Oh, nice. That's good. I like
that's
that.
Great.
That's very good.
Thank you. So we'll dive in to see your influences a bit. And I love getting this insight. Can you remember your earliest musical memory?
I have a pretty vivid recollection of us like dancing in our pajamas to music. Like that's one of my earliest memories. Like, just
was it Moulin Rouge?
It could have been, or like Outcast. Like, I don't know. Like, we're lucky to have very musical parents, so like they were always playing music in the house and stuff, and especially like the classic rock was always playing. Like I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, I used to carry around a Walkman. Speaking of CDs, those Walkman CD players where you just like put, and we always burnt CDs of our favorite songs, and then you just have like you'd like write your name on it, and then you'd have like the CD pack and your Walkman, and anywhere we'd go, we would just like bring the Walkman and like just like pace around and like listen to Nickelback or whatever I was listening to at like 10 years old, and yeah, that's a pretty early one for me.
Earlier than that, for me, it's probably like, yeah, it's stuff that our parents were listening to. It's some show tunes, definitely Les Miserables.
Oh yeah,
A lot of that was playing in the car, and like Crash Test Dummies and stuff like that.
Hey Ya by Outkast. That was a banger in our household when we were very young.
And in terms of metal stuff, I think the NHL 2006 video game soundtrack is what like awakened something. There were some heavy tunes in that.
And I always follow it on with, what kind of music were you exposed to in your teen years by your peers? And how do you think it molded you into the musician you are today?
Yeah. So actually, I have a vivid memory of when I was 11 years old. I was at summer camp and someone had just burnt a CD of like, this is good stuff, put it on. And it had Red Flag by Billy Talent on it. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is going on here? You can like, that was like the first time I heard like, I guess, I don't know what it was at the time. I guess it's punky. But that definitely was a vibe. And again, that was in several other like GameCube games. A lot of it was playing those video games and listening to the soundtracks as well. And Daniel and I must have played countless hours of NHL 06 on the GameCube. And every single song on that, there was like Avenged Sevenfold. The theme song was by this band, American Head Charge. There was a ton of stuff. There was some Atreyu on there, Bullet for My Valentine. Like that really got us going in that genre.
Yeah, and there was a lot of like discrepancy for me between, like peers were listening to like, Justin Timberlake, who's sick like in his own right, and I still like some Justin Timberlake tunes, and so I'd listen to a bit of that, of like the like poppy top 40 stuff that like my peers were listening to, because we didn't really grow up in like metal scenes. Like my metal connection was Michael, so like I'd come home and he'd show me like Linkin Park and like these Green Day and all that. So those were like the really early Breaking Benjamin, like really early first metal bands that like I was exposed to. So there was a difference of like, maybe some more hip hop, like rap, pop stuff from like friends of mine, and then Michael showing me like the metal stuff, and that really like getting a rise out of me. I remember first hearing, you mentioned Escape the Fate, which we'll get into later, but first hearing Escape the Fate and having there be singing and screaming and like in the same line. Like it was like the chorus was he sings a line and then screams a line, and it ruined me. I was so confused. It was the coolest thing I ever heard. And I was like, I need everything. Every music needs to be this. So that's a really early one that I remember you showed me then, and me wanting to just find more of that.
Before we dive into your concerts then, what is your local music scene like? Is there much competition? Is it very oversaturated?
And depends here or Toronto.
well, Montreal, it's not such a. There's a great music scene in Montreal overall. I think that we always had trouble fitting in on a bill here. So definitely when we play in Toronto, we can play at like a prog show. So we'll play along with all prog bands. Here, generally we would end up playing with like we would play with pop punk bands, we would play with death metal bands, we would play on these really esoteric bills, which I love that, but it's also harder. I think you're more likely to find fans and find people who like what you're doing when the show is more focused like that. So it was really cool, and I love that contrast, and I love going to those shows that were super all over the place. But from a more practical standpoint, probably wasn't as productive for us, but it was fun. Definitely not oversaturated. I think there's a healthy scene here. You can always find a show.
Yeah, it's decent. It's just it's like you're saying, like they love like hardcore and metalcore in Montreal. Like there's huge scenes for that, and pop punk, like huge, but prog is way less so. So yeah, it's interesting. And then we go to Toronto and it's like there's way more prog bands there. But yeah, I think after a couple of years of playing shows in Toronto, like we become buddies with them, and like we pretty consistently play with similar bands, and or members of those bands would start new bands, and like we got to know that scene pretty well too. And it's cool to be a part of like different multiple local scenes, because we were half here, half there, you know. So I liked being exposed to that. But now, especially like since we're gigging so rarely, yeah, it's like Michael's saying, like it's an interesting challenge every time to be like, all right, well, what bill really works? Because when we are playing, it's like, all right, this is our only show for the 6 months. Like let's find a fun, interesting bill. And yeah, we never been too stingy about it, but it's always an interesting challenge.
Yeah. And we'll dive straight into your concert experiences. So as a concert goer, what gigs do you think have made you?
Ooh, it's a good one.
So I'll say the second show I ever went to was Linkin Park in 2008. And they were opening bands were Coheed and Cambria and Chiodos. And at the time, I did not know those two openers. I really like Coheed and Cambria now, but I did not know them then. I was just like, there's a dude with hair doing stuff. It's kind of cool. But like Daniel was saying, like I was so into the contrast, like singing, screaming. I was into a lot of the rapping and screaming stuff also. I went to more Hollywood Undead shows than I'd like to admit. But definitely that Linkin Park show was really formative. And otherwise, Enter Shikari. Seeing Enter Shikari for the first time, they were opening for A Day to Remember. And they quickly became my favorite band ever. Because again, the contrast, having those electronics and seeing them do something different live, having them remix their songs live. That's the only band where if I'm showing them to someone, I show them like a live clip from Reading or something to show you, like, look at these, like they're all DJs, they're remixing their stuff. So seeing them live and also seeing the way that their singer Rao performed on stage really influenced my kind of onstage persona. Seeing Enter Shikari and another band, Let Live, the two of them had such kind of almost manic frontmen who were running around, climbing stuff, going in the crowd, rolling around on the ground. And I was like, that's like the energy that I want to bring to a show. I really quickly stopped playing guitar live because I wanted to be able to do that and run around and climb stuff and jump in the crowd, roll around on the ground. So basically seeing anyone doing that type of stuff live was super inspirational.
Yeah, that show that he's talking about, Enter Shikari and Let Live, was on my list too, because we went and saw that show. One of my earliest show experiences. I was pretty young. And yeah, I can echo the love for Shikari. Like that band's insane and definitely shaped us both as musicians. Like seeing them live is always, I've seen them a couple times. You've seen them way more than me, but I've seen them at least 3 or 4 times, and it's like blows my mind every time. They're such excellent performers, and all of them do vocals, and they just it's such an energy thing. Like they're giving it right to you, they're feeding off of you. Like they put on beautiful shows. I also really, I saw Tesseract live. And that really was unbelievable. They're one of the better sounding bands live I've ever seen. And North Lane as well. Both of those bands, I saw them, and I can say they both sound better live than on tracks. And they're both like highly, like, high level of production. Like they sound unbelievable on their records, but live they blew me away. Both of those bands, they just had it so dialed, and they put on such a show. And yeah, two of my favorites as well.
Some pretty cool gigs there. And for any of the listeners that haven't caught one of your gigs, then what can they expect?
Michael rolling around on the ground for sure.
So definitely that type of energy I try to bring in. And it's tough because when we're playing newer songs, they're always harder. We always write songs that are too hard for us to play, and we have to learn them. So as we're playing newer and newer stuff, I'm finding I have to try harder to actually do them well, and I end up moving less. And I can't wait until we've played these new things enough that they're so second nature that I can get a little bit more crazy with my performance, and jump around and do more stuff like that. So definitely high energy. We like to bring, I think something really unique about our shows is also the level of improv that we bring. So we always try to do kind of original solos and stuff. I know we try to give Daniel a drum solo when we can. Joseph won't always play. The guitar solo is exactly the same. And in the past, we've done total improvised jams at shows. So we've just been like, we're going to make something up on the spot. Sometimes I've asked for words from the audience and I've written like live lyrics basically and improvised a song about like, you know, based on 3 words that people give us. So I think that's pretty unique for our genre, especially to do jams like that.
Jeez, I don't think I've ever been to a gig that sounds even close to that. That sounds like just such a good time.
We should do that more.
I'll echo that with saying like that's what we hear a lot is like you guys just look like you're having fun. Like we're clearly just having a great time. We don't take ourselves like super seriously. You know what I mean? Like on stage, like we're down to mess around. We're looking at each other. We're making faces. Like especially with improv stuff, like we're whatever. Like it's for fun, and we can still like produce something fun and like good sounding. I hope, but in those times it's just fun. It's just the most fun to be on stage and to be able to explore like that. And yeah.
Is there a gig experience that you would relive over and over again? You know, the perfect gig in your mind that you just constantly go back to?
Really recently we opened for a band called Protest the Hero, which is really, really, really an influential band. Like I wouldn't have wanted to do a concept album without their concept album Kazaya, which was again like one of those gateway metal albums. I don't know, they're like, they have a huge, and they're pretty big, but they have a massive cult following, especially in Toronto because they're from Ontario, but pretty big following here. And that's one of the first times that I already had tickets to go to that show, and then we ended up being able to open for them. So I wanted to go anyway. I was like wearing their t-shirt while opening for them, got to kind of, briefly meet them. So that was kind of a dream come true. And there was a really good crowd. It was at a really cool venue. So far that's probably been my favorite. And that was just a few months ago. So
yeah, that was just this summer. And it was, the venue, the crowd, like it's definitely a step up from what we were used to. So it felt like you're taking that next step and you're opening for a band you really like enjoy and respect. So yeah, I was going to say that one too.
Yeah, geez. Sounds like, I love when things like that happen because it's like, it's almost like that's the point when you realize all the hard work is paying off and you're actually getting places, Yeah,
it's a cool feeling for sure.
Not to get too negative now, but we'll switch it around. Is there a gig you would say was the worst experience you've had, and how did you deal with it?
That's a way easier question to answer. We've been a band for almost 10 years. Like there's so many hilarious ones. I don't think it's not so much like this is terrible, but it's just like this is hilarious. Like he was mentioning our first few shows, like we played the 4 a.m. rave as a classic. Like we had a start time at 4 a.m. Playing at a rave that was a like metal and EDM. Like there were 2 stages in two rooms. Right. And it was in like the basement of a Chinese restaurant, and you just kind of go and rave and either listen to metal or listen to EDM. And like our start time was 4 a.m. So we just like attended this rave and like hung out and like tried to stay awake. And we played from 4 till 5 a.m. to probably like 3 people, maybe one of whom was conscious, and like went out after and watched the sunrise, and like had a 5 a.m. beer and called it a night. Like it was crazy.
Oh man.
I think you misheard the question. Now he was asking about the worst gig, not the best.
I was kind of thinking that doesn't sound like the worst.
No, I mean, it definitely like while you're mid set at that gig, you're looking out and you're like, what
are we doing?
It's like, what am I doing? It was fun though.
There were a few where we were opening for bands that were kind of on their last legs. It felt like. I won't necessarily call either of them out, but there's a few times where we've been to shows where it was maybe like a farewell tour or a band that was doing maybe a 10-year anniversary of something that had been a big hit, but with a success that they hadn't quite matched. And sort of we'd be opening, and these were usually bands that we did like and bands that we had listened to 10 years ago, and we sort of thought like, where'd they go? And then they're playing and there might be 5 or 10 people there, and sort of it just creates a negative vibe. And it's, you sort of look there and you're like, well, that's almost feels like a cautionary tale in some ways. Like you sort of think about, you know, how would I feel if that was me? It would feel pretty shitty to be like wrapping it up to like 10, you know, playing for 10 kids after all this time in the game. So a few of those were pretty negative. And were sort of a window into kind of the harsh reality, right? Where there's these bands that were like, oh, well, yeah, that's a huge band, right? Like they had that thing 10 years ago. And it's like, well, yeah, they had that thing 10 years ago, right? And they might have been producing stuff that I hadn't heard since then. So it's always been tough to see that.
Yeah. One just came to me then. How would you make sure that doesn't happen to you guys? You know, how would you keep on top of your game to make sure that you had continued success, I suppose?
I think it helps that I don't want to speak for everyone, but like we're all fairly neurotic and like we're very careful in what we do. Like we mentioned not gigging a lot, and that's kind of part of it, is that like you wait and you build up the anticipation, you let people chill and miss you, and then you go back and they come and see you. Just like things like that, and knowing when to say no to gigs and knowing what we want and how we're going to get it. We're very methodical. We're like very, we all are relatively on the same page. So we can really have these conversations with each other. And it's never just like, oh, we haven't gigged in a while, let's just take the first one that comes to us. Like we're very careful about what we do. So, and that's true for writing too. We're never just like, we need a song, let's finish the song and release it. So in all aspects of our stuff, like I mentioned, not taking ourselves seriously, but like I think we take ourselves very seriously in a lot of ways, but also we're loose and we have fun. So it's taking what we're doing seriously and like not putting out shitty stuff, not taking shitty gigs, like just taking pride in what we're doing all the time. And it clearly resonates with people because you're not gonna, I don't know, if we're working hard on something and we produce something that's good and that we like know is good, then so far it's worked. So I think it'll keep working.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're accountable to ourselves, and as long as we keep producing stuff that we're proud of and that we genuinely like, then there's nothing to worry about. We've had songs that are kind of in the pipeline that just aren't clicking. We don't release them. I wouldn't want to change our sound to make people happy or to cater to anything or to pander. People can, I think, sense that. And we're just kind of being ourselves and having fun. And that's what people like about it. So as long as we're having fun and we're proud of our stuff and like genuinely enjoy our own songs, I think it's really hard to enjoy your own music because you're so close to it. But I often will go back to something years later and listen to it. And I can still find some enjoyment in that and be like, there's cool. I would listen to this, like we've always wanted to make stuff that we would listen to, that we felt needed to exist or should exist. So as long as we keep having that feeling of being proud of it, thinking that it's good and feeling like this is good enough to release, then we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And, when you guys say you're playing a series of gigs, what sort of antics do you get up to backstage, before the show?
I mean, we're definitely like not super like crazy party guys, but like we're kind of big nerds. So like, they're like, our bassist's really into Yu-Gi-Oh! Like he'll be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Online before a gig. I'll be like, quietly looking up sports scores. I don't know. It's not anything too crazy, but we just like to mess with each other. Like we've known each other a long time now, so we'll definitely like give each other shit and just, I don't know. Can't think of any actual good examples.
I'm pretty low key before. I'm a bit of a diva before performing because of my voice and everything. So I don't like, especially when we're playing later in the night, people show up and you have to talk over the music at the gig. Like I'm going to fry my voice before I even start the show. So often I'm basically hiding before a show, finding somewhere. Like before one big gig, I like went downstairs and had like a tea at the bar so no one would talk to me. So it's this is the prog version of backstage antics, is like having tea and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I think.
There's also like our last gig, was it a month or two ago? There was a venue dog that was like in the green room, and we were all just completely content sitting and like hanging out with the dog and basically not speaking to each other. So yeah, that was a really, really good pre-show ritual. I like that.
Right. And how do you psych yourself up for a show? And then the reverse, how do you wind down after a show?
Depends on the show. Sometimes you need it more than others. I think, like, again, because we don't play too many shows anymore, I'm automatically stoked. Like the weeks coming up, even I'm thinking about it, and we rehearsing gets me psyched as well. Like when we were playing the set a few times, it's like, oh shit, okay, this sounds good. I think it's more that I need to calm down before shows because I'm like a little too antsy. But we give each other a little pep talk sometimes, and we all individually usually have our own little things. Like you'll have your vocal warm up, like I'll play a pad sometimes, and the other two are always on their guitar bass, like messing around kind of in their own bubbles for a bit. We'll do a little like 4-way props before we get on. And I think naturally we get psyched. I mean, we've been doing this for so long, like we know how much fun we have. So it just is enjoyable.
Yeah. I basically same, like rehearsal's huge. I usually spend about a week or two getting into shape. So doing sort of practices on my own also, like I'll run the set list just with tracks in like a room, just to make sure, like for me, I need to just remind myself that I'm physically capable of making those sounds. So I'll be nervous until I go into that room and I'm like, okay, I can either do this or I can do this well enough that I know I'll be able to do it when the time comes. And live, it's always going to be worse than it is kind of in that perfect environment. So I just want to get it to a level where I know that if it's X amount worse, it's still going to be good enough for me to be proud of. Yeah, winding down. I mean, it's super fun to headline, but I also like when there's a band, especially a band that we like, playing after us, because then you're done, you can chill, you can enjoy the show, you can chill at the the merch table and stuff. And yeah, it's nice. There's usually like a good kind of afterglow kind of wind down where you just sort of enjoy the night and usually meet people afterwards, the merch table and stuff. And
yeah, I love the merch table hangouts. That's always a good vibe after, and just chatting. People are always really nice, especially when they've seen you. And if they don't know you, it's super cool to meet people there. Like I love the merch table hangs.
The last couple of years, the music industry was totally decimated as a result of the pandemic. No gigs, nothing happening. As a band, how did you guys deal with it and get through it?
We spent a lot of time away from doing stuff. Not really by choice, but yeah, like you were saying, we just like there was a good half a year or something that we just like didn't do anything. Slowly ramped it up, and then I think, at least for me, like when you haven't done that creative thing in a while that you're used to doing, like you're kind of itching for it. So it was really easy to get back into. But it was, yeah, like you're mentioning, it's tough to like write tunes when you don't have gigs in any foreseeable future. So you're like, why am I writing these tunes? So it was really tough creatively, and it took time to get back going. But the songs that we just like that we're finishing up and gonna put out soon were born from that time period, I think. Yeah.
Some before, some during, some after, yeah.
Right. So yeah, but a couple of them, and they're great. They're great songs. So we definitely like just had to recalibrate and find our footing. And we tried like the online, like fully online writing stuff. It didn't work too well. Like I think we all took our own little leave from it for a bit, and then it brought us back stronger than ever. Like we were okay to pick things back up, and the first gig back was awesome. And
yeah, I think we were a bit fortunate with the timing, at least, where Beyond the Nest came out January 2020. And then we played 2 shows to promo it, one in Montreal, one in Toronto, February 28th, maybe 20, I guess was it a leap year? Maybe February 29th, and then March 1st. And then we had a big gig lined up in April that we were really excited for. We were playing with Animals as Leaders at the Corona Theater, of all places. Nice. And then things got shut down. But I think we were fortunate that we had just put out Beyond the Nest, and Pigeon Superstition was like getting a little blessed by the Spotify algorithm. and we kind of, let it ride. And we're really fortunate that we seem to have sort of just been able to grow a little bit organically, just by at least having that piece of work out that we were proud of. And then, yeah, like Daniel was saying, we basically didn't do anything for at least a year. We had maybe half a song, and then we picked it back up once we were able to do stuff again physically. And yeah, we're also fortunate that we're in a position where we were able to step away from it for a year and still be okay to get by and everything. So it's definitely tough times.
Yeah, it is. And this is an interesting one now. Do you think that there's anything that kind of benefits that came out at that time that benefits the music industry now?
I mean, what I've heard from like touring bands is that it allowed a lot of people to care for themselves a little more, like to not take those shitty jobs, and to kind of realize, well, now there's no jobs available, and I'm not miserable all the time because I'm not on tour in a tiny van all the, so it's like little things that shift some perspective of, maybe I shouldn't accept people taking 30% of my merch sales, and maybe I shouldn't accept this tour where I'm not given a lot of help, or so I think that stuff is good. It doesn't necessarily affect us directly, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty good time of like personal growth for a lot of people. It's definitely like just a big life event for everyone. I think it definitely, probably the first half was like some of the darkest times of my life, and then things really turned around, and a lot of that comes through in the lyrics and the themes of the upcoming release. So any kind of dark time or big adversity is going to make you grow a ton as an individual. So I suppose that's a positive. I joke sometimes with other vocalists or people who write lyrics that like when we're super happy and things are going great, it's like, well, I have nothing to write about. How am I supposed to write metal music if I'm happy? Which I actually think is pretty toxic. And I'd like to lead sort of this revolution of happy people writing metal, be the content, happy or otherwise. But that was kind of interesting, where I think when there's rough times, you have no shortage of stuff to write about or negative experiences to pull from, especially when you're writing heavier, darker music. So
yeah. And in say 30, 40 years time, you're old, you've gray hair, you need a Zimmer frame on stage. You look back at your career, what needs to have happened for you to feel fulfilled and happy?
All I ever wanted was for people to mosh to my music, and that has happened, and I'm happy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy and fulfilled already. Like the fact that sometimes we step back and we think, like, the fact that we're even doing this at the level that we're doing is insane. Like I vividly remember us in the basement jamming those songs and being like, could we ever play a show? Like, could we ever do a show? Like, that would be nuts. Like, there's no way. And it's like, how many shows have we done? And people actually come to our shows and know the songs and like the songs and mosh. And it's like, whoa, it's pretty wild. So very thankful and grateful for that. But I guess, yeah, you just keep doing it. Like we were saying before, if you love it, you keep doing it in whatever capacity you can, even if you're gray and can't move. Just there's a reason it's been the most consistent thing in my life, at least over the past decade, right? So we love to do it. If we keep loving it, we'll keep doing it. So yeah.
Right. And we spoke about the new music earlier on, but what are your future plans? What's locked in place? Is there dates you can give us?
No dates.
Right.
But
yeah.
But music for sure.
We can say songs. Next year, like 2023.
Yeah.
Something will come out in 2023 for sure. Nothing's locked in. To sort of jump back in terms of things I'd really like to do, we'd really like to get on a bigger proper tour. Whether it's sort of around Europe or the US or even just across Canada. So that's definitely a big goal for the future. But right now, what we're looking at is we have these songs in the pipeline. We're going to release them. We're going to do music videos. We're going to get artwork. Like that's going to be a lot of work. And that should start coming out next year for sure.
Brilliant. That was actually my next question. Would you guys ever consider a national or a European tour? So I'm glad to hear that you're that's in the pipeline anyway.
Yeah, we'd love to come out, and we've spoken to some people over there about making that happen. So hopefully we can someday. It'd be really fun. I've never been to Europe. I would love to go.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, your music would absolutely be just loved over here. You definitely have a massive crowd for it anyway.
Sweet. Good to hear.
And we'll dive into the last couple of questions. So everybody gets these, so you can't get off the podcast till you answer, I'm afraid. If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
Oh, man.
It's a great question.
Let's see. I would want to see Chester Bennington again. I saw him once, but that he was such an influence, and so that hit really hard. And maybe that's a bad answer to want to see someone you've already seen again, but that's what comes to mind right now.
No, that's understandable. There's thousands of people that he's on the list that they didn't get a chance to see. So yeah,
I'd maybe go the Beatles.
Right.
I think that would be sick to see that show.
I was thinking that would definitely cross my mind.
Just as a cultural phenomena, that would be really cool.
Yeah. Which era though? Would it be the Cavern Club, the Wrigley Field, or the rooftop gig?
I mean, probably, yeah. I'd just want to be in one of those massive, like the one of the stadium, the like Wrigley Field one, or like just bring them over here, like do a downtown Montreal show. That'd be cool. And just like the streets full, and you have screens like a city away, and there's still people in the streets to see them.
Yeah, it'd be epic. And the next one then, it's kind of a weird one. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would it be?
I've got the vocalist from Counterparts in my head, Brendan Murphy, because I'm seeing them tomorrow for the first time, and they're one of my favorite bands. And I've always wanted to pick his brain, and seems to be a very funny guy too. So I think it would make the 24 hours manageable and hilarious.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
This is tough. Let me think. Counterparts is good. From history. Oh, can I come back to this one?
If you want.
You can't get off the podcast till
No, I can't get off the podcast. It's going to be dead air
next week.
So much dead air. Oh man. I'll say. Oh, I want someone like I'd want to talk to someone about lyrics specifically. I'd want to specifically talk to someone about lyrics. You know what? I'm going to say Arif from Protest the Hero. He wrote the lyrics for their first 2 albums, and like I said, Kazaya was so formative, and I love like analysis, and unpacking the layers and discussing the hidden meaning of that album was so important to me. Becoming the musician I am, so I'd want to talk to him about the themes and the meaning and how he constructed that, especially because he was so young when they wrote that.
Oh, good choice. Good choice. And the final one, what song would appear on the soundtrack to your life?
Let's see.
That's one I always go back to.
I'm gonna go.
Holds a lot of weight, this decision.
I'm gonna say Second Sucks by Day to Remember, and I'm imagining it's playing as I'm like coming out to do like a WWE wrestling match. Like, that's my intro song.
Oh, that's cool.
Perfect.
I'm gonna say Language 1 by the Contortionists, because that's one of the best songs ever written.
Right, that's a good reason. So right, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved getting an insight into your music now.
Yeah, it's been
Awesome.
great.
Thanks so much for having
Great
us
chatting.
on. Yeah.
Don't roast me, I'm already baked. Let's get this myself. Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is DJ JC, and I'm one of the DJs over at Super Cool Radio. I host a 1-hour metal show called The Brutal Block. We have new episodes every Tuesday, dropping at noon. So if heavy metal music is something that you're into, then make your way over to The Brutal Block. Throw up the horns, and let's get rockin'!
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're interested in signing up the Band Builder Academy, use the link in the show notes below and enter the code CONCERTS and you'll receive 10% off. So, until next time, keep rockin'. Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.